So on this channel, you'll find videos on all of the various motivation theories you'll find on different A-level syllabuses, but I wanted to do a video in the lead up to the exams that looked at motivation as a whole for those doing some last minute revision, particularly for those students focusing on the possible exam question of how should business X motivate its workforce. So in general terms, motivation is the desire to achieve something, and when we're looking at organizations or business scenarios, it's the desire for employees to be productive, to do things that help the organization to achieve its corporate objectives. Now, motivation is an important concept for managers because it links to the business's performance, to its costs, and there are many benefits to having a motivated workforce, and there are many drawbacks if you have a demotivated one. One of the big benefits of having motivated workers in your organization is that you will have lower labor turnover, or in other words, fewer of your workers will leave, and coupled with that, you'll also experience lower rates of absenteeism. So fewer workers will be taking days off because they don't fancy the trip into work, because their motivation levels are low. Now, the concepts of lower labor turnover and reducing absenteeism are important for organizations because it directly links to their labor costs. The more members of staff you have handing their notice in and leaving, the more money the firm is going to have to spend on advertising job vacancies, conducting interviews and other selection methods, as well as the money they're going to have to spend on training new recruits. And when it comes to absenteeism, the more staff you have off on any particular day, the more money you're going to be paying to staff who are not there, but also potentially having to pay to temporary workers who are going to come in and cover the shifts of the workers that you have absent. We should also find that a more motivated workforce will be more productive. In other words, they will get more work done in a given time period, and this helps improve the efficiency of the organization. Now, the reason why greater productivity levels might improve the efficiency of the organization is because if each worker is motivated and they're working harder and they are producing more work, you might not need as many of them to reach your desired level of output. It might be the case that whereas you used to have to employ 50 workers to reach the level of output that you needed to produce, now that they're all working harder, you might only need 40 workers, which is going to lower your labor costs, making you a more efficient organization. And there are other benefits of motivated workers as well. It might be that the quality levels that each worker produces are enhanced, or if they've got customer facing roles, it might be that the customer service that they deliver to your clients is improved as well. So that leads us to a very common exam question of how do we improve motivation? What is the best way to make your workforce more productive? Now remember, if you are looking for more in-depth videos on each of the individual motivation theories, have a look through the channel, they're all on there. But in this video, we're going to try and give you a brief overview of these methods of promotion to look at what makes workers more productive. And our first idea comes courtesy of Frederick Winslow Taylor. So Frederick Taylor's conclusions that became known as scientific management was essentially that money and financial incentives are the only thing that make workers work harder. If you want to raise the productivity of your employees, you have to make it financially beneficial to those workers for them to work harder, for them to put in more effort, and for them to increase the levels of their productivity and create higher levels of output. And because of the ideas of Taylor that money is the only thing that motivates, there have been lots of systems developed to try and incentivize workers to produce more by paying them for doing so, such as piece rate pay, where rather than getting paid per hour of work, regardless of how much you do, instead you get paid per piece of work that you generate. Or we could give workers bonuses if they achieve a certain level of output, to motivate them to reach those output levels. Or if we have workers that are in sales roles, rather than paying them high salaries, we could give them lower salaries and commission, which is a cut of any sale that they make for the business. Or we could try and incentivize output by using systems like profit sharing with our workforce, so that the greater the profits of the organization, the greater the rewards to the individual worker. Now, in exam questions that ask you how we might motivate a workforce, it's very common for us to pitch Taylor's ideas of financial rewards on one side of our argument, but not everybody agreed with Taylor, and we will need some ideas about alternative things that might raise the productivity of our employees that we can write about in the other side of our debate. And for those ideas, we could turn to another Frederick, but Frederick Herzberg this time, who had very different ideas about how to raise the productivity of workers. Now, Herzberg fundamentally disagreed with Taylor in that he did not think that money could raise people's productivity. He came up with the idea that if people felt underpaid, then they would feel undervalued, and this might harm their motivation. Workers who went in every day thinking that they should be paid more would not be motivated. In fact, they would be demotivated. But he didn't think the prospect of earning more would actually encourage workers to increase their productivity. It was just the feeling of sorrow and loss that you were being underpaid that could harm their productivity. Now, aspects of work such as financial reward, Herzberg called hygiene factors, things that needed to be good enough to keep people satisfied, but the prospect of them being bettered wouldn't actually improve motivation. Instead, Herzberg had his own list that he called his list of motivators that he thought could actually raise productivity levels, and these things were all tied in more to workers' emotions than their desire for financial rewards. Things like feeling like in your job you have achieved something, or you have a sense of responsibility, or the work that you're doing is challenging, or that you are being recognized potentially through promotions for the quality of work that you are performing. Now, if you are looking for further resources to help you revise the topic of motivation or any of the other areas on your syllabus, head over to the TakingTheBiz.com shop. But returning to the question of how best to motivate workers, we've now got two opposite ideas. On the one hand, we've got Taylor screaming at us that you need to financially incentivize people's output. But on the other hand, we've got Herzberg saying, well, money needs to be enough to stop workers being demotivated, but it won't make them more productive. For that, you've got to tap into workers' more emotional needs and look at the challenge of the work that they are doing and whether they are recognized and they feel a sense of achievement. But there is another question to consider as well, and that is whether everybody is motivated universally by the same things. Is it as simple as just pitching the idea of financial rewards or emotional factors against each other and saying one of those two schools of thought is correct and the other is wrong, and everybody would be motivated by just one thing? Well, an academic who thought that motivation theory was a little bit more complex than it being universal for everybody is the psychologist Abraham Maslow, who developed his hierarchy of needs. Now, Maslow came at motivation theory from a slightly different angle in that he didn't think that there was just one thing that motivated everybody. He thought that the same person could be motivated by different factors during different stages of their career. For example, Maslow thought when people were first starting out in work, they were very much motivated by the same ideas that Taylor had. People work for money to help take account of their basic physiological needs. People need to rent somewhere to live. People need to purchase food and clothing for themselves and their dependents, and they need money to meet those basic needs. So it was money and the prospect of more of it that might motivate people when they are at the lower levels of their career. But crucially, Maslow believed that people were only motivated by their physiological needs for shelter, food, and clothing until they were confident that they were earning enough to regularly be able to pay for those things. Once those needs were taken care of, they would no longer motivate the individual, and they would start to look up to the next level of Maslow's hierarchy to try and motivate them instead. And the next level up is the need for safety. People now are motivated by the need for security in their work. Things like a permanent contract or a pension, so that they don't just have an income today, but they have an income in their retirement as well. But just as with our physiological needs, Maslow came up with the theory that once our safety needs are met and we're paying into a pension and we feel like we have some longer term security, that stops motivating us, and workers begin to look at the next level in his hierarchy, which links to the idea of a theorist we've not looked at in this video, but we do have a video on elsewhere on the channel, and that is Mayo's idea that it's more social aspects of work, such as team working, feeling part of a group, feeling social connections, particularly social connections with your superiors, and feeling like they might take an interest in you and even ask your opinion. Maslow said those were the next things that started to motivate people in their careers. But again, once our belonging and social connection needs are taken care of, we look further up the hierarchy to motivate us, which is where Maslow thought that some of the ideas that Herzberg had might begin to motivate us. So at this level, we might be motivated by ideas of self-esteem, which Herzberg said we might be able to get from feeling a sense of achievement from our work or being given challenging tasks to do. But again, once those needs are met and we feel like we have them, we look to the very top level of Maslow's hierarchy to motivate us. And that is the level of self-actualization, being as good as you can be, feeling like you've reached your full potential. So whereas Maslow was saying that motivation is our hierarchy at different stages of someone's career, they could be motivated by different factors. We have Taylor, who took a more basic view that financial rewards were the only way to increase productivity, and Herzberg, who believed that only emotional factors could encourage workers to be more productive.